All right, I'm going to try to make a short little summary video for photosynthesis for you. It is in Module 3, Chapter 5. There is a short little video from an old textbook that shows you the reactants, the products, and the two different stages of reactions, the dark reactions, the light reactions that occur. I recommend you watch that video a time or two to help you understand what's happening there. This video that I'm making right now is going to be posted right underneath that summary video. So, here's your basics for photosynthesis. The summary equation that you're usually taught in high school looks like this picture down here at the bottom. Plants need carbon dioxide and water in order to make sugar, which is their food, and then they're going to release oxygen as a byproduct. A lot of students end up with this misconception that carbon dioxide releases the oxygen. That is not what happens though. Plants are going to reduce the carbon dioxide to make the sugar. The water is going to be split to release oxygen and then hydrogen, and we'll talk about the relevance of that as we kind of go through here. Basic plant anatomy and how it relates. So the cellular anatomy of a leaf, we get the epidermis, upper and lower. The lower epidermis has stomata, which is kind of like the mouth of a leaf. That's where gas exchange can happen. In other words, plants breathe through the stomata. This might be where students get that misconception that carbon dioxide is going to create the oxygen, because they both do move through the stomata, but again, those two gases are unrelated to each other. Plants are going to be breathing in the carbon dioxide because they need the carbon dioxide to carry out photosynthesis, and then they're going to be breathing out the oxygen because again, that was a byproduct of photosynthesis. The epidermis, aside from having those pores, usually on the lower epidermis, doesn't have chloroplasts usually. Instead, the inner part of the leaf contains this mesophyll, and there's two types usually. We've got palisade mesophyll and spongy mesophyll. The mesophyll cells is the typical plant cell that you think of when you think of a plant cell, so it's the cell that has the chloroplast to it. The anatomy of a chloroplast has an outer membrane, and then it has an inner membrane that's called the thylakoid membrane. The thylakoid membrane contains the pigments that are going to be necessary for absorbing light. So the thylakoids are where the light reactions are going to occur for photosynthesis. And then in between the stacks of thylakoids, you have this sort of watery matrix that's called stroma. The stroma is where the dark reactions are going to occur for photosynthesis. Stacks of thylakoids are called grana for plural. One stack of thylakoids is a granum. Pretty much already told you what a stomata does, so we could really skip that slide. Pretty much already told you what those two things do, so again, could have skipped that. So in cellular respiration, we had glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and then electron transport. Here we have just two stages, the light reactions and the dark reactions. That's how I was taught photosynthesis. They're trying to change those names because it turns out the dark reactions can happen in the light as well. So now they have the light dependent reactions and the light independent reactions. The light independent reactions also have this cycle that's called the Calvin cycle. They're trying to get away from that name as well because they're trying to take people's names out of things, and so they're really trying to call these the light dependent reactions or the light reactions, and then the light independent reactions, which used to be called the dark reactions. To make it simpler for you guys, I'm basically going to say light reactions and dark reactions. In terms of what's supposed to happen here, the light reactions are called that because they actually use light, usually sunlight, but if it's an indoor plant, it can be a light like a light bulb. That light is going to power the splitting of water to create a hydrogen ion gradient that's going to be relevant for an electron transport chain and that exact same ATP synthase that we had in cellular respiration and that electron transport chain. So as the light splits the water, we release electrons and we release hydrogen ions. The hydrogen ions are going to flow through ATP synthase to create ATP. The electrons also flow through here to end up reducing a different electron carrier than what we've had before. Back in cellular respiration, we had FAD getting reduced to FADH2, and we had NAD getting reduced to NADH. Here we have this new electron carrier called NADP+, that gets reduced to NADPH. Here's what's special about this. So we use light to split water, to transfer electrons, to reduce an electron carrier. We also create that hydrogen ion gradient to help us make ATP. So we created two different forms of energy, chemical energy. We have ATP and we have NADPH. So the whole purpose of the light reactions is to create these two forms of energy. And you can see that here in this summary picture from a second ago. The light reactions split water and create ATP and NADPH. Then we're going to go to the dark reactions, which in this picture is labeled the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle is going to use the energy created in the light reactions to reduce the carbon dioxide to create a sugar. So let me come to this picture right here. So carbon dioxide gets fixed to a molecule that we're just going to call RUBP. It's ribulose biphosphate, but RUBP for you. The enzyme that does that fixation is the most common enzyme in the world, according to biologists. It's called rubisco. So rubisco fixes that carbon dioxide to RUBP to create 3-PGA. Then we spend our ATP and our NADPH to reduce the 3-PGA to make sugars. The sugar that we make, according to that summary reaction video, is glucose. However, in reality, we make something called glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, or what this picture is calling G3P. If you put two G3Ps together, you can make glucose. However, we do have to regenerate our RUBP, and so some of those G3Ps that we make go into regeneration so that we can keep this cycle going. If we don't regenerate, this isn't a cycle. Photosynthesis grinds to a halt, the plant dies. So we have to do all three of these steps in order to keep photosynthesis going. So we fix our carbon, we reduce our PGA to G3P. Some of the G3Ps regenerate to RUBP, but some of them get to exit so that we can convert it to a sugar that the plant's going to use as a food source. So coming back to, this is a different summary picture from a different textbook. Light reactions split water into oxygen to make energy. The Calvin cycle uses the energy to reduce carbon dioxide into a sugar. That's essentially how photosynthesis is going to work. I hope that helped you understand how things are going to work. Again, I recommend that you watch that other video a couple of times. That will help explain all those complicated sugar molecules that are going on in that Calvin cycle. That is the light independent reaction. It's also, I know, really confusing when one cycle has a million names, and all I can do is apologize for that. Biology is, it's under a revision as we try to make names make sense. And the light independent reaction makes sense because it's a reaction that is independent of light. The dark reaction didn't really make sense because it doesn't just happen in the dark. And the Calvin cycle, who would know what that was if they didn't know what Calvin did? And again, names can be problematic because sometimes people are problematic. And so that's why they're trying to remove names from things. Good luck with quizzes and tests. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to email me.